in the heart of southern Italy, where the sun kisses the Mediterranean and shadows stretch across narrow alleys, a secret empire was born, not of kings or politicians, but of blood, a bloodline that would one day control billions and command fear across the world. They called themselves La Cosa Nostra, our thing. To outsiders, it was just a rumor. To those inside, it was a way of life. The story begins in Sicily, a land of olive trees, poverty, and pride. In the late 1800s, when foreign rulers controlled the island, local families began to form their own codes of justice. They didn't trust the government, so they made their own: honor, silence, and loyalty. These became the laws of the mafia. But as time passed, these codes turned into something darker. Protection became extortion, justice became violence, and silence became fear. Each generation of the mafia family learned one truth: blood may fade, but power must never die. By the 1920s, Italian immigrants carried these old traditions to America. They settled in New York, Chicago, and Boston, bringing the Sicilian codes with them. What began as small protection rackets soon evolved into a billion-dollar underground network. Drugs, gambling, extortion, and politics. The mafia turned every sin into a business. Behind the wealth stood one family, the most powerful of them all, whose roots could be traced directly back to Sicily. Their fortune was built not on gold, but on blood. They controlled ports, banks, and politicians. Their money flowed from the vineyards of Italy to the skyscrapers of Manhattan. But behind the elegance of their suits and smiles lay a history written in violence. And through every assassination, every betrayal, every deal with the devil, their bloodline survived, because they believed in one thing: family is forever. This is the story of that bloodline, a billion-dollar dynasty hidden behind silence, fear, and tradition. And it all began in the dust and heat of old Sicily. As the 1920s roared across America, the Sicilian bloodline found its opportunity. While Wall Street crashed and cities drowned in poverty, the mafia saw gold hidden in the chaos. Prohibition, the ban on alcohol, became the greatest business opportunity in criminal history. They smuggled liquor through secret tunnels, hidden docks, and crooked police officers. From Chicago to New York, Italian families built empires on whiskey and fear. Every bottle sold, every bribe paid, added another brick to their invisible kingdom. But among them, one family rose higher than the rest: the Carvelli bloodline, old Sicilian nobility, now dressed in American silk. They owned restaurants, warehouses, and shipping lines. Behind every family business was a maze of money laundering and silent killings. Their leader, Don Vincenzo Carvelli, ruled with elegance and precision. He never shouted. He never appeared in photographs. Yet every gangster in America knew, if Vincenzo wanted you gone, you'd disappear before dawn. He built his empire on three principles: control the streets, control the politicians, control the banks. And so, while lawmen hunted gangsters with guns, the Carvelli family bought judges with cash. Theirs was not just a criminal operation. It was an economy. They reinvested their blood money into hotels, construction firms, and financial fronts. Soon, they owned parts of cities without anyone knowing their names. Behind the curtains, priests blessed their children, politicians shook their hands, celebrities attended their weddings. To the world, they were respectable businessmen. To their enemies, they were the ghosts of power. The mafia had always thrived in silence, and silence became their shield. By the mid-1930s, the Carvelli fortune was estimated at over $500 minus one, hidden in offshore accounts, art collections, and diamond smuggling routes. Their power stretched from Palermo to Manhattan. Yet, with every fortune came a curse. Don Vincenzo's eldest son, Marco, was ruthless and hungry for more. He believed fear was the only real currency. His father believed in respect. That conflict would soon divide the family and set off a chain of betrayals that would shake the bloodline for generations. The world only saw headlines: gang violence in Brooklyn, mysterious explosion at docks. But beneath those stories, The Carvelli bloodline was silently rewriting the financial map of organized crime, and every drop of blood spilled became another coin in their hidden fortune. By the late 1930s, the Carvelli empire had become untouchable. Politicians owed them favors, cops turned a blind eye, and their money flowed like a dark river beneath the city. But inside the family mansion, silence had turned into tension. Marco Carvelli, the Don's eldest son, was no longer satisfied being the prince. He wanted the crown. His father, Don Vincenzo, still ruled with restraint, a man of patience and diplomacy. But Marco was pure ambition. He saw weakness in patience and power in fear. He began forming secret alliances, bribing soldiers, buying loyalty, and spreading whispers through the ranks. The streets of New York trembled with rumors. The son wants the father gone. Inside the old dining room, where marble angels watched over every meal, the family dined in silence. Forks clinked, wine poured, but no one met the Don's eyes. He knew his empire was cracking, not from the outside, but from within. One night, a message arrived. A trusted courier, dead before sunrise. A bullet in the back. The message he carried was gone. Vincenzo understood. The betrayal had begun. He summoned Marco to the study, a room lined with portraits of their Sicilian ancestors. The two men stood face to face. Between them, 100 years of blood and tradition. Vincenzo's voice was calm. "You want power, then learn the cost of it." But Marco's eyes burned with defiance. "I'm done learning, father. I'm ready to rule." That night, the mansion echoed with silence, the kind that follows storms. Within weeks, loyal men began disappearing. Marco had moved faster than his father imagined. Then came the explosion. A warehouse in Brooklyn, gone. 5 men dead. It was the Don shipment, his network, his message to the city. Or so Marco wanted everyone to believe. But the Don wasn't dead. He was waiting. He knew that blood once spilled could never be gathered again, and that the son who betrays his father must one day face the ghosts he created. By 1940, the FBI had begun taking notice of the family's unusual financial patterns, but no one dared speak, because those who spoke vanished. The Carvelli bloodline had survived wars, rivals, and lawmen, but now their greatest enemy was their own name. As America entered World War II, the world turned its eyes to Europe, and the Mafia used that distraction to bury their crimes even deeper. Gold was moved, accounts were cleaned, and the bloodline continued, darker and richer than ever before. But inside the family, a silent war had begun, and the next act would be written in betrayal. By 1941, New York's underworld was trembling. The Carvelli bloodline, once united by loyalty, was now split in two. Father against son, honor against hunger. Don Vincenzo, wounded but alive, retreated to Sicily under the protection of old allies. From there, he rebuilt his network, silently weaving strings across the Atlantic. Meanwhile, in New York, Marco crowned himself the new king. He ruled with terror. He replaced respect with fear, and anyone who spoke the Don's name in public was buried in silence. Marco's men burned businesses that refused to pay. They killed rivals in daylight. To him, blood was just another currency. The old codes, honor, silence, family, no longer mattered. But the older generation whispered, "The boy has no roots. He forgets where he came from." From Sicily, Vincenzo watched his son's rampage through trusted eyes, spies, priests, and loyal soldiers still faithful to the old bloodline. He knew Marco's power was built on chaos, and chaos never lasts. In 1943, when Allied forces invaded Sicily, the Mafia made a silent pact with the Americans. In exchange for information and control, they were promised protection, and Don Vincenzo used that chaos to return, not to reclaim power by guns, but by money. He began working through the shadows of global finance, moving gold, laundering cash through post-war reconstruction projects, and buying influence in European banks. While Marco ruled the streets, his father ruled the world's money. Soon, every dollar Marco earned in blood passed through his father's invisible hands. The Don had turned revenge into business. Marco didn't realize that his empire was being hollowed out from within. His trusted accountant disappeared. The shipments went missing, and rumors began to spread. The old man is back. The underworld began to shift. Old soldiers started switching sides, drawn not by fear, but by respect. Even Marco's closest men whispered, "The Don's ghost still rules." By 1945, Marco's arrogance had isolated him. His empire was collapsing. He had money, but no trust, guns, but no loyalty. And one night, he received a message, a letter sealed with wax, marked only by a blood-red rose. Inside it, 4 words written in Italian: "Blood returns to blood." It was his father's warning, and his judgment. The war for the throne was coming to an end. But in the world of the Mafia, endings are never clean. Only the blood decides who survives. By 1946, Europe was rebuilding from the ashes of war. Nations were rising again, and so was the Mafia. Amid the ruins, money flowed like water. Reconstruction funds, stolen gold, black market deals. And in that chaos, one man quietly returned, Don Vincenzo Carvelli. He had aged, but his mind was sharper than ever. While others saw ruins, he saw opportunity. He moved through Rome, Paris, and Geneva, disguised as a businessman rebuilding Italy. In reality, he was reconstructing his empire. The Carvelli bloodline was no longer about street crime. Vincenzo had evolved it into something far greater, a financial shadow network. He partnered with bankers, warlords, and even politicians who needed untraceable help. Every deal was washed clean through new banks in Switzerland and the Vatican's secret vaults. Meanwhile, in New York, Marco's empire was crumbling. The police raids were increasing. His men were turning against him. His wealth, the very thing he killed for, was vanishing into accounts he could no longer access. Then he learned the truth. The banks, the ships, the shell companies, all were now owned by one name, V. Carvelli, his father. It was as if the Don had never left, only changed his battlefield. Marco raged, shouting, "He's old, he can't win." But he didn't understand. The Don no longer fought with bullets. He fought with signatures and silence. In Geneva, behind marble walls and golden vaults, Vincenzo sat across from European financiers. They asked, "Mr. Carvelli, what is your business?" He smiled faintly. "My business is stability." With every deal, his reach grew. Construction, shipping, art, and currency trading. His empire was invisible, legal on paper, unstoppable in practice. He had turned crime into capitalism. By 1948, the Carvelli bloodline was reborn, not as a gang, but as a dynasty. Their money shaped cities, funded governments, and bought silence in high places. And Marco, once feared across America, was now a fugitive in his own kingdom. He tried to run. He fled to Cuba, then South America, where old allies gave him shelter. But every time he touched his fortune, it slipped away. The Don had already erased his name from every ledger, every account, every deal. In one letter, delivered to Marco's hideout, his father wrote, "You built your throne on blood. I built mine on patience. Now tell me, my son, whose empire lasts longer." For the first time in his life, Marco understood what true power was. Not fear, not violence, but control. The world thought the Mafia was dead after the war, but in truth, it had only changed its face, from bullets to banks, from alleys to boardrooms, and one old man, Don Vincenzo Carvelli, had just become the silent architect of a billion-dollar bloodline. By the dawn of the 1950s, the legend of the Carvelli bloodline had become myth. Don Vincenzo was a ghost, unseen, untouchable, ruling from shadows. But his son Marco was a man on the run. In Havana, Marco drank away his fortune, surrounded by fading loyalties and hollow promises. Once, his name commanded fear across oceans. Now, he was just another fugitive, hunted by the law, forgotten by his men. But ghosts of power die hard. One night, a mysterious envelope arrived at his hotel, sealed with the same blood-red rose that had haunted his life. Inside, a single photograph, his father, smiling beside American bankers and politicians. On the back One sentence, written in neat Italian handwriting. You chose fear. I chose time. Marco's hands trembled. For the first time, he realized the war was truly over. The empire he had tried to steal was never his to begin with. It was built on patience, loyalty, and silence. Things he had traded for blood. He tried one last desperate move. He contacted an old ally in Sicily, promising him millions if he could help reclaim what was left of the Carvelli fortune. But that message never reached Sicily. The ally he trusted had already sold his name. At dawn, Cuban police raided his suite. No resistance, no shootout, just Marco Carvelli sitting in silence, staring at the sea. His arrest made headlines. American Mafia air captured in Havana. But his father never spoke of it, not once. No calls, no lawyers, no money sent, only silence. Inside prison, Marco's body began to fail him. His health declined, but his pride never broke. He once told a guard, "Tell my father, the streets remember my name." The guard replied, "Maybe, but the banks remember his." In 1954, Marco Carvelli was found dead in his cell. No signs of struggle, no official cause, just a quiet note written in blood. "Forgive me, father." When the news reached Vincenzo in Geneva, he didn't react. He simply closed the newspaper, poured himself a glass of wine, and whispered, "Blood returns to blood." To the world, Marco's death was the end of a criminal era. But to Don Vincenzo, it was something else, the sealing of his dynasty's fate. The streets had taken one son, but the empire lived on, purified by silence. The Carvelli bloodline would continue, not through violence, but through finance, politics, and legacy. The Don understood something his son never did. Power isn't in who pulls the trigger, it's in who owns the bullet factory. And from that day forward, Don Vincenzo made a vow. No more blood, only business. The world would soon forget Marco's name, but it would never forget the Carvelli fortune. By the 1960s, the world had changed, and so had the Mafia. The gunfights and blood feuds of old were fading. Now, the real wars were fought inside banks, corporations, and governments. And at the center of this silent web sat Don Vincenzo Carvelli. He was no longer called Don by anyone. In Europe, he was simply known as Signor V, a mysterious investor who moved millions without leaving fingerprints. His fortune flowed through shipping lines, oil companies, art auctions, and private banks. He had turned criminal wealth into legitimate empires. To the outside world, he was a ghost with a golden signature. To those who knew the truth, he was the architect of modern organized finance. From New York to London, Zurich to Buenos Aires, his money connected cartels, governments, and even intelligence agencies. When the Cold War began, his network quietly served both sides. Information, weapons, and cash all could be moved through his invisible channels. And yet, the Don's name was never spoken aloud. Every transaction went through code names, front companies, and dead accounts. Even the CIA once referred to him in secret reports as the banker from the shadows. In the dim halls of power, whispers grew. The Carvelli money built half of post-war Europe. No one could prove it. No one could stop it. In one meeting in Zurich, a young banker once asked Vincenzo, "Why risk everything for money?" The old man smiled faintly. "I don't risk for money. I build for immortality." And immortality was exactly what he achieved. His bloodline was no longer tied to the streets of Sicily or the crime families of New York. It was now part of global politics, untouchable, invisible, eternal. But as the empire grew, so did its darkness. Every nation it touched became stained with corruption. Every government that borrowed from it became its servant, and every businessman who partnered with the Carvelli network eventually disappeared. Don Vincenzo had learned to move power the way others move air, unseen. But everywhere. By 1968, the Carvelli fortune was estimated by hidden accounts to exceed $4 billion, a number impossible for the world to trace. He was no longer the man who ruled the alleys of Sicily. He was the ghost who ruled the modern world. But even ghosts age, and time, though silent, waits for no one. As the Don entered his 80s, he began writing what he called the Testament of Silence, a secret document said to reveal every account, every partner, every hidden truth behind his empire. He said it would only pass to one person, his granddaughter, Isabella Carvelli. The next generation had been chosen, and with her, the bloodline would once again change shape, from the shadows of men to the mind of a woman raised in wealth, secrecy, and fear. The billion-dollar bloodline was ready for its next chapter, and the world had no idea that it was already living under its rule. When Don Vincenzo Carvelli finally disappeared from public sight in 1972, the world assumed he had died, but no funeral was ever held, no grave was ever found, only silence, the kind that protects legends. Behind that silence, his granddaughter, Isabella Carvelli, quietly stepped into his world. Educated in Switzerland, fluent in 5 languages, trained not in violence, but in psychology, law, and international finance, she was the perfect heir, not a soldier, but a strategist. The Testament of Silence was passed to her in a locked silver case. Inside, documents, account keys, blackmail photos, and names of powerful men who still owed debts to the Carvelli bloodline. At first, she refused to believe what she saw. Her grandfather, the kind, soft-spoken man who taught her to play piano, was also the mastermind behind the world's most secret criminal economy. But as she read deeper, one truth became clear. The empire wasn't built on crime alone. It was built on control, the ability to influence nations without firing a single bullet. By the 1980s, Isabella took control of her inheritance. Under her guidance, the Carvelli fortune shifted into the modern age, technology, oil, international trade, and offshore banking. She transformed her grandfather's empire into a global corporation. Governments thought they were dealing with a financial genius. They had no idea they were working with the heir of a bloodline born in the Sicilian underworld. Through shell companies and digital fronts, Isabella's network began funding world leaders, manipulating stock markets, and even influencing international elections. She moved power the way her grandfather moved silence, elegantly, invisibly, and without mercy. But unlike Vincenzo, Isabella didn't hide in the shadows. She attended elite events, posed for magazines, and spoke about philanthropy and economic progress. No one knew that behind her charm lived a financial web stretching across continents. She once said to her private advisor, "My grandfather ruled through fear. I will rule through trust." And she did. Her companies built hospitals, schools, and infrastructure projects in war-torn countries, all funded by money washed through the old Carvelli accounts. Every good deed made the world love her more. Every smile concealed the family's ancient code. Never let them see your shadow. By the 1990s, Isabella's net worth was estimated to exceed $10 billion, yet no one could trace the origins of her wealth. Every trail led to dead corporations, erased identities, and silent banks. Rumors began spreading through the underworld. The Don's granddaughter has done what no man could. She turned crime into civilization. But power always has a cost, and deep within the Carvelli bloodline, that cost was still unpaid. Because while Isabella had inherited her grandfather's brilliance, she had also inherited his enemies, old debts, old betrayals, and one secret organization that had waited decades. As the wealth of the Mafia grew, so did its hunger for control. But what most outsiders never saw were the silent wars fought not on the streets, but in the family dining rooms, in the shadows of Sicily's bloodline. The older generation, the Dons, who had seen the world through blood and silence, believed in loyalty, family, and the old ways. But the younger heirs, the sons and nephews raised in luxury, they wanted modern power, politics, corporations, cryptocurrency. And so, a new kind of war began, one that used lawyers instead of soldiers, offshore accounts instead of Tommy guns, and cyber networks instead of dark alleys. These internal rivalries split families in half. The Corleonesi against the Palermos, cousins turned enemies, each claiming to be the true successor of the billion-dollar bloodline. Meet Lorenzo Vitali, the heir of a forgotten dynasty. educated at Oxford, fluent in 5 languages, but carrying the same ruthless fire as his grandfather. He saw the Mafia not as a crime syndicate, but as a brand, an invisible empire that could control global finance without ever pulling a trigger. Lorenzo began converting the family's dirty money into clean assets. He bought art galleries, tech companies, real estate in Dubai. But behind that shining glass facade, the same old code remained: family first, blood above all. And anyone who broke that rule vanished quietly, efficiently, without a trace. Interpol began calling it the Digital Mafia, a network so sophisticated that its financial movements looked like legal transactions. No guns, no drugs, just digital power, and the ghosts of an empire that refused to die. The police could no longer see their crimes, because the crimes had evolved. Now, the Mafia didn't just rule the streets. It ruled the stock market. It ruled governments. It ruled silence. As one Sicilian proverb says, gold makes no noise, but it buys every sound. And in that quiet, the billion-dollar bloodline continued to breathe, in shadows, in politics, and in the hearts of men who still believed that power was their destiny. The Mafia had entered a new century, smarter, richer, quieter, but its blood was still the same: red, ruthless, and royal.